I'm a bad man. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
And what I've done is going to be puzzled over and studied and followed forever.
And the Oscar goes to Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Christopher Nolan is goated with his Best Picture win and Best Director win in the Academy Awards for the movie Oppenheimer 2023. And I have just finished all 12 of his films. We're going to rank them here together today. And look, I really appreciate him. I know he is categorized as one of those film bro directors. And I think that comes with such a negative connotation when in reality it's trying to give, even if it's flawed characters, they are trying to grow, and whether it be positive or negative, oftentimes negative, and that misconception gives the film bro community a really bad rap. But I really, really enjoy a lot of those films and Christopher Nolan as a director. And I find all 12 of his films to be good at the very least. And I'm always going to be excited when he has a new release. I'm super stoked to see that he got the recognition that he did deserve in a stacked movie year. I thought 2023 was really, really good. And albeit I saw a lot more films from that year, so it's going to seem a lot more stacked when you haven't seen as many films comparatively. But Oppenheimer was an absolute game changer. But we'll get to that when we get to that portion of the list. And we're going to start at number 12 and work our way upwards, with number 12 being Insomnia. This has the likes of Al Pacino and Robin Williams. And admittedly, you have an idea that this wasn't my favorite film because it's so low on the list. I wish that the project in which Nolan got to work with certainly Pacino, one of the biggest names in all of acting, and Robin Williams, just such a interesting actor, I wish it would have worked out better. One of my main complaints when I saw this film is that it just felt too cookie cutter. And you know that they're trying to have these interesting twists, but it felt semi-predictable, which is something that really can't be said for, I guess, almost all of Christopher Nolan's works. So it stands out from that point of view because Nolan is such, and his brother are both tremendous writers. In this film, it was inspired by a book, which also was made into a film, a foreign film, prior to this film even coming out. But it doesn't feel distinct enough, as crazy as that sounds. There's definitely some interesting elements to this story, but some of the twists just, it didn't hit me quite the right way. And that's definitely the worst thing that I can say about this film. But I will say it was good. It didn't feel like a complete waste of time, which those are ultimately the films that are just going to kill us, you know? And it does have some thoughtful commentary on what justice truly is, which is a little bit different narratively than what a lot of like cop and investigator detective type films usually go for, where it's like, oh, the line of good and bad is so thin, right?
The only idea more overused than serial killers is multiple personality. On top of that, you explore the notion that cop and criminal are really two aspects of the same person. See every cop movie ever made for other examples of this. Mom called it psychologically taut.
Right. So it was interesting from that standpoint, but ultimately the least favorite, at least to me, film from Christopher Nolan. Moving on to number 11, we have The Dark Knight Rises, one of the entries that is almost certainly going to make my father mad in hearing this. Now look, this is a tier above Insomnia as far as I'm concerned, but a tier below, at the very least, the other entries of the Dark Knight trilogy. I will say, I thought Tom Hardy to be the best Bane we've ever seen. And that's not, super stiff competition, but he dramatically changed his physiological makeup for this film. And I'm sure drugs had no impact on that whatsoever. You get a fitting conclusion to the Bruce Wayne Batman, kind of the relationship that the person and the symbol have with one another. And you get the introduction of Catwoman that is not bungled the way it had been in past cinematic expeditions. Those are all the very good elements to this, and ultimately the film is very good. And I almost completely forgot potentially the most important part of this film that makes it so enjoyable, the twist that you get. I thought I didn't see it coming whatsoever, which, to my point previously, is more in line with what you would expect from Christopher Nolan. I would definitely watch it if you liked Batman Begins, if you liked The Dark Knight. You haven't seen this yet, and for whatever reason you're watching this video, check it out. But for me, and I'm going to go into the reasons when I get to each Batman movie on the list, it's just a hair below the next one, at least. But that is my number 11. But before we get to that next film, I would ask you and implore you, please hit the bell icon, subscribe to the channel. I have a ton of videos that I absolutely know you're going to love. I just did a Paul Thomas Anderson ranking redux that you're going to want to check out, as well as Quentin Tarantino movies ranked, Stanley Kubrick movies ranked. And on top of that, I have a ton of podcasts where I dive deep into films with guests and video essays on specific films. So please subscribe to the channel and check out the videos in the channel because I know you're going to love it. Coming in at number 10, we have Tenet. And I can see some people maybe rolling their eyes thinking this deserves to be last, because I know a lot of people really didn't like this, and it's one of the lowest rated films from Nolan on Letterboxd. At least I want to voice what some of the complaints that I heard, and those are that the main characters didn't have a lot of personality. And I'll give you a point in that John David Washington, as far as the protagonist goes, and ironically or coincidentally, he is the protagonist character name in this, didn't have as much personality as like even Christopher Nolan's debut film, as Batman, though you can argue that, as the main characters in The Prestige, as Conaughey, as Guy Pearce in Memento, as Leo. And I don't know if that has to do with writing or acting. I think it's definitely a combination of both. But I do think there's films like Dunkirk where that isn't necessarily what makes the film great. Sometimes the story, the action, or, you know, the things that can kind of transcend film beyond just performances made this great. And I do think that the sci-fi element, everything that makes things go backwards, that whole thing is just so brilliant. It's well above my head, and it's so convoluted that it could just be gibberish, and you know, I'm just gonna eat it up because Christopher Nolan said it, so yep, it makes sense. That was such a cool element to be in this film. And the next criticism is that the action sequences where things are moving backwards, there was good elements to that and bad elements, and I agree. Some of the action was hard to appreciate compared to normal action, just because you're seeing, like, it's hard to understand what's going on all of the time. It made for stuff that you've never seen before, and some of that because no one would think of it, and some of it's because it doesn't actually quite work all the way. That all being said, I liked Robert Pattinson. Obviously, the central mechanism in this I thought was terrific. It worked well to just create this completely new movie element and also a world-ending threat. So that ultimately made for a great film, in my opinion. And I describe this film as James Bond meets an actually really well thought out world-ending threat. And if you look at it that way, how can I not really, really like this film? At number 9, we have Following. And this film is Christopher Nolan's debut. What surprised me an awful lot about this film is that despite the fact that it's just relative unknowns, the two main characters, they actually have really good performances. It's a short movie, just a hair under 70 minutes, yet it shows that Christopher Nolan can craft a very well done narrative that makes sense, that has twists and turns, that even young audiences, again, can look at the main character and kind of see themselves in that character and see their transformation and maybe even strive for something similar, although the ending could very well put a wrench in those plans. That being said, it's a really impressive debut, in my opinion, and shows a shit ton of talent really early on. It's not as highly rated as some other Nolan films, clearly, but I was very much impressed in it, and I think I was kind of grading it on a curve considering it's a micro budget and a debut film, but I was really impressed. And to my point, when I reviewed this, I said, this isn't a film that you just watch to complete Christopher Nolan's films. I genuinely think this is a good film and would sell it as such. Coming up next, we have Batman Begins.
What the hell are you? I'm Batman.
When I first saw this film, I was not a huge fan of the ending. I thought it was too cartoonish for this trilogy that we had become infatuated with because of its grittiness. And now when I watched it again, I actually really appreciated that ending. And I'm talking about mostly the subway scenes, but a lot of the interactions in the city of Gotham feel directly inspired out of the comic book. And it almost has a freshness in watching it back because of how gritty The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight was, that it doesn't feel like it's taking itself too seriously. In fact, is trying to just kind of make the comic book come to life. And we have a good mix of that today with all the films that you can watch from the 2000s onward. But after the success of this trilogy, especially in DC, there was a ton of films that were trying to emulate that. And it kind of oversaturated, especially with the works that weren't as refined as Christopher Nolan's, with trying this grittiness and not quite working, to where it became passé. That now I do appreciate the kind of comic book nature. It feels more akin to the Batman films of old, and not super old, obviously, like just a decade or two before this. But I appreciated that in retrospect, and I think makes this film pretty cool. And it introduces the whole Bruce Wayne Batman battle for identity in a really good way that I think takes hold completely and goes somewhere that's intensely gripping once we get to the second film in the trilogy. Coming up next, we have Dunkirk, another film that I rewatched because I think I was a little hard on the Beaver.
Ward, I think you were a little hard on the Beaver. So was Eddie Haskell, Wally, and Miss Cleaver.
The first time round. And I think it's great now that I watch it. There's just specific choices made in this film that I'm just going to mention that I think it's just worth noting. First and foremost, you never see the enemy. Secondly, not a lot of dialogue spoken. Thirdly, it's just you don't know much about really any of the characters. And you have to kind of pick up on things just through context that comes later on. So, for example, we get the Frenchman who's trying to leave with the English, and I think I'm getting that right, but I honestly am not 100% sure if that is actually his, nationality, but he's burying the dead body. We only know as much as the main character does, and they don't communicate. So we just know someone died somehow. He's taking his uniform, and he's trying to find a way off of Dunkirk. Then you get Harry Styles. You know he's a Highlander because he finds himself back into a group because they are part of the same regimen, and you get a really good idea of what type of character he is when the intense moments hit the fan. Same with Cillian Murphy. You get these flashback scenes that give you an idea of what he was prior to shit hitting the fan, and then how he was traumatized afterwards. So he's in the rowboat, he's trying to find a way off, thing gets torpedoed, we got to go back, and then something terrible had to have happened to him because once he gets to the ship, he just is shell-shocked. And so on and so forth. Tom Hardy being heroic. You get to see the heroism and the cowardice that comes during war. And it makes sense because it's a very human endeavor when humans are behind the weapons, and when you're surrounded, and when life and death are just moments away, depending on what happens next. It's great. And it gives an aspect of war that I think has been done before, but was very well done with this. And just the scenes where the production design, all of the extras that had to be in specific scenes just to make this feel ultra real was super worth it. If someone said this is their favorite war film, I don't think I would think they're crazy, because it is that grand, and I can see a lot of people really liking it. It's not my favorite war film, but I will say it's a damn good one at that. Next, we have Inception. This is another raking that is definitely going to piss my dad off. And that's not the meaning of this channel. Let's get it straight. This is a film that is ultimately really great. A lot of people find it to be a masterpiece. And I think if I were to watch it again, I would probably, at least just in rating, want to bump it up. That being said, great production. You can tell this is a blockbuster movie. Leonardo DiCaprio is amazing. Tom Hardy is really good. Cillian Murphy, good. Altogether, really great performances, but it is the story of a dream within a dream that some people are going to find like, dude, that's such a stupid idea, or it's so simple that it's brilliant. And I fall on the latter side of the argument. I think this is a great movie. It's a great plot that only Nolan, the Nolan brothers, could come up with. And if I'm being completely honest, I do think, to an extent, this had a large impact on cinema and likely changed it forevermore after its release. Say I'm over dramatic with that, but I really do think this film changed things once it came out. Now we have Memento, another film that I think it's on the level of Inception as far as how groundbreaking it is, but I'm not sure it gets the same. I don't know. A lot of people have seen this. A lot of people really, really enjoy it. I think it's a hair better than Inception. Guy Pearce is clearly amazing. And then how the narrative finally takes form by the very end, where we have the story, like, you know, Guy Pearce is an insurance claims person, and he had this one case where a guy had what he has and ends up killing his wife, and now Guy Pearce is trying to avenge the death of his wife. It's just insanely brilliant. And then you get to the ending where there's a enormous reveal for Guy Pearce and the audience, and his decision following this reveal. All of those details, decision points, really make this film great. And when I'm talking about Insomnia and how it feels like there's these great big reveals, Inception and Memento are kind of what I'm talking about, because these reveals and some of the next ones that are going to come up are just so insane, mind-blowing, profound, and brilliant that it just leaves you feeling like you watch something magical when you leave. Coming up next, we have The Prestige.
It was the greatest magic trick I've ever seen.
This is like a sentimental favorite. I really, really enjoy this, and clearly a lot of people on Letterboxd do as well. Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale are tremendous in this, and with its twists and turns and big reveals, it impresses. But I think what I really like the most about this is, story-wise, the characters of Jackman and Bale's determination to outdo the other, and seeing how far that will take them is what I find really, really interesting. Now, obviously, they have two tricks, and we want to figure out how each one is done, and the reveals behind those are mind-blowing and become intensely rewarding. But I think, in my opinion, where this gets the edge is that character's psychology piece between Jackman and Bell. I really like the chemistry of those two and how they're written to have this kind of insane rivalry. Really made this film just a little bit more special, in my opinion. Coming up next, we have Interstellar. This is a film that had a cinematic it was a cinematic experience that felt like this is the reason we go to the films. This is why we go to the cinema. I mean, it has just enveloping audio. It has mesmerizing visuals that make the scenes that are supposed to be grand, like going to this new planet that is enormous, have the weight of that enormity. That is something that I think solidifies Nolan as a great director, and one that should be watched in the cinema. And I don't know how many other directors you could say that about, if I'm being honest. He is one of the last of the Mohicans. Interstellar is one of those films, and it was just such a personal feeling where I was legitimately in awe during it. Great narrative, great twists and turns, really good performances by McConaughey and his daughter, which eventually is played by Jessica Chastain. I really like this film. Again, Letterboxd really likes this film too. It just felt like almost a perfect storm for Christopher Nolan, but because of how good a director he is, Christopher Nolan has had multiple perfect storms, because Oppenheimer is at number 2. A lot of people are going to say Cillian Murphy's performance was amazing, and I'm not going to say it wasn't, but there was a ton of really good performances in this film. Robert Downey Jr. killed it. Cillian obviously killed it too. It was really cool to see Josh Hartnett. You got Casey Affleck, Rami Malek. The list goes on, but just so many little performances that I think go unsung that helped make this film what it was. But beyond that, you have the cinematic moment of the testing of the bomb that just, it made me just like lean back, look at the screen and it just felt like time stood still for a second, and then you get this incredible audio and visual where, you know, it was cinema magic, and that's what it made it feel like. Damn, I couldn't experience this anywhere else but the cinema. It was insane, and I loved every minute of it. Oppenheimer is, you know, of the releases from 2022 to now, the best film of those years, you know, 2.5 years at this point. Though, admittedly, I have to watch more films from 2024, but that's still a pretty loaded list, y'all, and something amazing is going to have to come out to overthrow it from this time period. It deserved Best Picture, and it deserved pretty much every single, you know, award that it got. I can't sell it the way it needs to be sold, but, you know, it's a profound topic, the creation of the atomic bomb and how it changed the world, and in my opinion, Christopher Nolan did that profound subject matter justice. But that leaves just one film left, and that is The Dark Knight.
No, I didn't rig those charges.
Your man, your plan.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
All time, and the more I watch it, the more locked in I become that, yeah, this is still amazing. I still love this film. And I've watched it, you know, just a week ago, and it still holds a special place in my heart. Heath Ledger.
Enough from the clown.
Let's not blow this out of proportion.
Look, that is one of the best performances I've ever seen. And off the top of my head, I can't name one better. It might very well be the best performance.
I told you, I'm a man of my word. Where's the Italian?
That makes this movie special on its own, and something I'm going to love, because I love performances. But then you get these amazing action sequences, a tremendously well-told crime drama. All of those elements on their own is going to be a film that I love. But what makes it one of my favorite films of all time, like in my top 4, is what they were able to do from Batman Begins to The Dark Knight.
And I thought my jokes were bad.
With the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Batman and heroism. So Batman and Bruce Wayne are separate. Bruce is able to do things that Batman can't, vice versa. And you can see for the first time that Bruce wants to break away from Batman because he has a person that he loves that he really can't be with someone while also having this second life.
The good cop, bad cop routine?
Not exactly.
And then once the Joker pushes things to the limit, as he is one to do, we see Batman make a decision that is what a true hero would do. It's not the easy thing. You know, you see in Marvel movies, yeah, they destroy the city, but ultimately this big bad threat needs to be taken down.
Listen, why don't you give me a call when you want to start taking things a little more seriously? Here's my card.
Collateral damage would have happened whether it was the government fighting off this existential threat or if it was some superhuman.
You know what I am? I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it. You know, I just do things.
But with Bruce, who isn't a superhuman, to up the ante, it comes down to Bruce actually having to kill the version of Batman that he has in his mind and also in the mind of the people of Gotham.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
To him, Batman was kind of a gift that he gave, much along the lines that what his parents gave to the city of Gotham. I'm going to help you and I'm going to show you that you can stand up to the likes of people who seem more powerful than you. But when he realized they needed a legitimate shining knight.
I only have one question. Where is Harvey Dent?
difference does that make?
Well, depending on the time, he may be in one spot or several.
To inspire them after all the madness that had gripped the city took place, he realized, I need to be the fall guy because that is what is needed now. And he did something heroic by doing the difficult thing that was needed. And I don't know if this has been ever spelt out so finely or executed so finely, but I absolutely loved that about this film, and is the final piece of the puzzle that makes a film that I'm gonna absolutely love. Enough spiel about The Dark Knight. I'm sure we've all heard what makes this film so great before. I really appreciate you joining me. Be sure to hit the bell icon, subscribe to the channel, let me know your Christopher Nolan rankings down below, and I will catch you on the flippity flip.